Accepting life as it comes. Buddhist wisdom. At some point, something in your life didn't go the way you needed it to. A loss, a disappointment, a plan that fell apart when you were counting on it most. And somewhere in the middle of that, you came across the idea that acceptance is the answer. Maybe in a book, maybe in a quote someone shared online, maybe in the kind of advice people offer when they don't know what else to say. Accept what you can't change. Let go of what you can't control. And at first, it helped. There was something relieving about giving yourself permission to stop fighting. You felt lighter for a while. But life kept moving, and the sadness came back. The disappointment you thought you'd accepted showed up again, sitting in the same place it always sat. You tried accepting that too, and maybe it worked, briefly. But something about it never quite held, like you were putting a bandage on a wound that kept reopening, without ever looking at what the wound actually was. Those words, accept, let go, stop resisting, aren't wrong. They carry real wisdom. But perhaps we've only been standing at the entrance of something that goes much further than we realized. The Buddha began with the same observation that brings most people to this question. Something about life, even at its best, carries a quality of incompleteness that no amount of rearranging seems to resolve. And instead of turning away from that observation, he looked directly into it. What he saw, he called dukkha. Dukkha is most commonly translated as suffering, and that translation captures something important. But the word reaches further than suffering alone. In his very first teaching, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Buddha laid out the scope of dukkha with striking precision. Birth is suffering. Aging is suffering. Illness is suffering. Death is suffering. Union with what is displeasing is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are suffering. That last line is where most people stop listening, and where the teaching actually goes deepest. The 5 aggregates are the Buddha's way of mapping everything that makes up lived experience. The body and its physical sensations, the feelings that arise moment to moment, pleasant, painful, or neutral, the perceptions that recognize and label what's happening, the intentions and reactions that shape how you respond, and the awareness that knows all of it is taking place. Together, these 5 cover the entire field of what you experience. And the Buddha said, when any part of this is clung to, grasped tightly, demanded to remain as it is, that clinging is where dukkha lives. This means the teaching doesn't stop at the obvious hardships. It reaches into everything, including the things you love most. The relationship that fills you up today will change shape. The body that serves you well right now is already moving toward a time when it won't. The achievement you worked years for will eventually be replaced by a new concern. None of these things are bad. They are impermanent. And somewhere inside, you already know this, which is exactly where that quiet restlessness comes from. Even when everything is going well, even when the job is stable and the relationship is warm and the body is cooperating, there's a part of you that senses the ground is always moving. This isn't pessimism. The Buddha was looking at life the way a doctor examines a patient, clearly, without adding opinions about whether the diagnosis is fair. He was making an observation about the nature of everything that arises through conditions. It cannot fully satisfy, because it cannot stay. And in that same teaching, the Buddha identified what keeps the cycle of dukkha spinning. He called it tanha, craving. It is this craving which leads to renewed existence, accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That deep pull toward what's pleasant, that urge to freeze it in place, to have more, to never let go. In the broader framework of his teaching, this craving doesn't act alone. It moves together with dosa, aversion, the impulse to push away or fight what's unpleasant, and moha, confusion, the deep misreading of how things actually work. These three fire automatically in most people all day long before anyone notices. Something good happens and craving reaches for it. More of this. Keep this. Don't let this change. Something painful happens and aversion pushes back. This shouldn't be here. Make it stop. And underneath both, confusion sustains the belief that if you just arrange things correctly, the restlessness will finally end. What the Buddha proposed was direct. See what is actually happening: the loss, the gain, the change, the joy, the discomfort, before these reactions take over. See dukkha clearly, without adding to it. And from that clear seeing, act. From wisdom, from understanding, from a mind that is present with reality instead of at war with it. This is what acceptance means in the Buddhist sense. You are seeing, clearly, completely, and from that seeing, you are free to respond to life with intelligence and care, instead of being pulled by reactions you never chose. In the Lokodhamma Sutta, the Buddha described 8 conditions that move through every human life: gain and loss, fame and disgrace, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. These 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. They touch everyone, no exceptions. These conditions always come in pairs. You cannot have gain without eventually meeting loss. You cannot enjoy praise without blame appearing somewhere behind it. You cannot hold pleasure without pain finding its way in. This is what conditioned existence looks like up close. The impermanent nature of everything that arises through causes, expressing itself through the circumstances you navigate every single day. And these conditions spare no one. Good people get blamed. Honest people get misunderstood. Hard-working people lose what they spent years building. Loving people get hurt by the ones they love most. This doesn't happen because the world is unjust or because you deserve it. These forces move in both directions. They always have. The Buddha made one crucial observation in this teaching. He said that both the ordinary, untrained person and the noble disciple encounter all 8 conditions. Both of them. These forces don't care how good you are or how long you've practiced. What differs is what happens inside. The sutta describes this with remarkable precision. The untrained person encounters gain, or loss, or praise, or blame, and does not pause to see what it actually is. In the Buddha's words, they don't reflect. I've encountered this gain. It's impermanent, suffering, and perishable. They don't truly understand it. And because they don't see it clearly, something specific happens. Gain and loss, fame and disgrace, blame and praise, and pleasure and pain occupy their mind. They favor gain and oppose loss. They favor praise and oppose blame. They favor pleasure and oppose pain. The Buddha's conclusion is direct. Being so full of favoring and opposing, they're not freed from suffering, I say. And this doesn't only happen with the big events, the major losses, the public failures, the life-shaking crises. It runs through the smallest moments of an ordinary day. Someone doesn't reply to your message, and a knot forms in your stomach. You're opposing what's happening, reaching for the acknowledgement that didn't come. You check your phone and see good news, a deal closed, a compliment received, and there's a small rush of warmth, a lift, followed almost immediately by the thought, what if the next one doesn't go this well? Even in moments this small, the pattern of favoring and opposing is running. It's so constant, so automatic, that most people don't even notice it. They just feel the restlessness, the tension, the exhaustion of never being fully at ease, without ever seeing the machinery underneath. This is how most people live. Not because they're weak or unintelligent, but because no one has ever shown them what's happening. The entire inner life becomes a reaction pattern shaped by whatever arrives from the outside, rising when conditions are favorable, collapsing when they're not. And the most exhausting part is that it never ends, because these conditions never stop shifting. There's always another gain, another loss, another praise, another criticism. The cycle keeps turning, and the person inside it keeps being pulled up and down, for an entire lifetime. The closing verse of this sutta describes what it looks like when that pattern breaks. An intelligent and mindful person knows these things, seeing that they're perishable. Desirable things don't disturb their mind, nor are they repelled by the undesirable. Both favoring and opposing are cleared and disappeared. They are no more. So these 8 conditions are always moving: gain arriving, loss following, praise turning into blame, pleasure giving way to pain. And most people spend their lives trapped in the pattern of favoring and opposing, rising and falling with whatever comes, never finding ground that doesn't shift. Given all of this, the question that matters most is a practical one. Is there another way to meet what life brings? The Buddhist answer is rooted in a specific quality of seeing. There is a term in the Pali texts that the Buddha used to describe the kind of understanding that changes your entire relationship to experience. The term is Yathabhuta Jnana Dassana, and it carries the entire purpose of Buddhist practice inside it. Break it apart. Yathabhuta means as it truly is, in accordance with reality, as things actually are, without distortion. Ana means knowing, the kind that comes through wisdom, through direct understanding. Dassana means seeing, direct seeing, the way you see the sun when you look at the sky, without needing anyone to persuade you it's there. Together, knowing and seeing reality as it actually is, through direct insight. This is the crucial distinction. Yathabhuta Jnana Dassana has nothing to do with intellectual understanding. You can read every book about impermanence and still be devastated when something changes. You can agree with every word of the Buddha's teaching and still be pulled apart the next time blame arrives or loss hits. What this term points to is something that happens deeper than thought. A direct seeing, the kind that reshapes the way you move through the world because you have witnessed the truth of it in your own experience, in your own body, over and over. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the same teaching where the Buddha first described dukkha, he made this unmistakably clear. So long as my knowledge and vision of these 4 noble truths as they really are in their 3 phases and 12 aspects was not thoroughly purified, I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world. Knowing about them was not enough. Believing in them was not enough. He needed to see them directly, from the inside, with complete clarity, before the understanding was whole. You've probably had brief moments of this already, even if you didn't recognize them at the time. A moment where something painful happened, and instead of your usual reaction, you simply saw it. Saw the situation, saw the feeling arising, saw your own impulse to react, and for a breath or two, The reaction didn't fire. Something in you was present, watching, seeing what was actually there. In that moment, you were seeing things as they are. What Buddhist practice does is develop that capacity, deepen it, strengthen it, make it available when life is pressing hardest. And when this seeing develops, something begins to happen on its own. The Buddhist tradition calls it upekkha, equanimity, a stability that arises naturally from understanding. You feel everything, the weight of blame, the warmth of praise, the ache of loss, and you are present through all of it, without being governed by it. This has nothing to do with numbness or indifference. Indifference, what the tradition calls āññanupekkha, is closing your eyes in the middle of the storm and calling that peace. Equanimity is standing in it with open eyes, seeing everything clearly, and finding that you don't need to be carried away. Ajahn Chah, one of the great meditation masters of the Thai forest tradition, is remembered for a teaching about a glass. As Mark Epstein recounts in Thoughts Without a Thinker, Ajahn Chah once held up a glass of water while speaking to visitors and said, in essence, "This glass is already broken. I can enjoy it, drink from it, appreciate the way it catches the light. But because I understand its nature, I am not shocked when it eventually falls and shatters." Seeing that the glass is already broken does not make it less precious. It makes every moment with it more precious. This is Yatha Bhutanyanadasana, alive in a daily gesture, seeing impermanence directly, in the glass held in his hands, and finding that this seeing doesn't diminish his love for it. It completes it. The same applies to everything you encounter. When you see clearly that gain is impermanent, you can receive it fully without gripping. When you see that loss is impermanent, you can stand in it without collapsing. The energy you once spent favoring and opposing, chasing what's pleasant, fighting what's painful, becomes available for something else entirely, being here, fully, with whatever is actually happening. In the beginning, practice is messy. You understand dukkha. You know about the 8 conditions. You remember the glass that's already broken. And then someone criticizes you publicly, or a relationship falls apart, or you lose something you spent years building, and everything you understood vanishes. Craving grabs, aversion pushes, confusion takes over, and afterward you think, I thought I understood this. Why did it still hit so hard? This is where most people give up. They conclude the teaching doesn't work, or that this kind of stability is reserved for monks on mountaintops. But this moment, being knocked down and feeling like you failed, is actually where the most important thing begins. Because something has already changed, even if you can't feel it yet. Before, the conditions would shift, and you'd react instantly. No space, no awareness, just automatic response. Blame would arrive, and you'd be inside the anger before you knew what happened. Loss would hit, and you'd be drowning before you had a chance to breathe. Now, after you've begun to look at these things honestly, something new appears between what happens and how you react. A gap, very small at first. A moment, maybe half a second, where you notice blame is here. A painful feeling is arising. You still react. You still get carried, but you saw it. And that moment of seeing, right there in the middle of everything, changes the entire landscape. It's as if, for the briefest moment, you're standing beside your own reaction instead of being trapped inside it. You can see the pull, the craving to fight back, the urge to collapse, the confusion spinning stories about what this all means. And for once, you're not swept into it immediately. You're watching. And in that watching, something very old, and very automatic, begins to loosen. Each time you come back to that seeing, each time you notice what's arising, feel its pull, and stay present even a moment longer than you did the last time, the gap gets wider. You start to have room. And in that room, something becomes possible that wasn't possible before. You can choose. You can choose whether to follow the old pattern of favoring and opposing, or to stay with what's actually here. You won't always choose well. Some days the force of what hits you is too strong and you'll lose your footing. There will be times when you think you've made no progress at all, when loss strikes so hard that the reaction swallows you whole and you feel like you're right back where you started. But you're not where you started, because even in the middle of that reaction, something in you knows it's reacting. That knowing wasn't there before, and it doesn't go away, even when everything else feels like it has. There is nothing dramatic about this process. No fireworks, no sudden transformation. Just the slow, steady deepening of someone who keeps showing up, keeps looking honestly, and doesn't quit when it gets hard. The Dhammapada, verse 83, describes what this looks like when it has fully matured. The virtuous let go of attachment to everything. When touched by happiness or sorrow, the wise show neither elation nor depression. These 8 conditions still move. They never stop. Gain still comes, loss still follows, praise still warms, blame still stings. But the one who has practiced long enough has grown roots deep enough to stay present through all of it, bending with what comes, without breaking. The last words the Buddha ever spoke are recorded in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta. Before he passed away, he looked at the people who had walked beside him, who had practiced what he taught, and he said, "All conditioned things are subject to decay. Strive on with diligence. Everything that comes together will come apart. Gain will turn to loss. Joy will pass. Pain will pass. Nothing conditioned stays. And yet, do not stop. Do not grow careless. Do not give up." Buddhism doesn't teach you to accept life as an act of resignation. Buddhism teaches you to see life, to see it clearly, to see it deeply, to see it all the way to the root. And when you truly see, something happens that you could not have predicted. You no longer need to fight reality, but you don't surrender to it either. You stand in the middle of life, steady and still moving, not because you are strong, but because there is nothing left to protect. And from that unshakable place, you act, awake, compassionate, and tireless.